Hello and welcome to this new episode of UX Design Conversations in 2023. And actually, this is with a jury member for the next year, 2024 spring. This is a series in which we invite our guests to share insights about their work and expertise and about their experience in building and leading design teams. My name is Ake Rudolf. I'm director of the UX Design Awards and head of strategy at International Design Center Berlin. We're the organizers of the UX Design Awards. I hope that today's talk will inspire you and that you can take out something from what we're talking about for your own work and career. In this episode, I'll be talking to Matthias Schmiedbauer. He is design director and partner at Manyone in Munich, Germany, and coming on board for the jury of the UX Design Awards 2024 in spring. So Matthias, a warm welcome to this episode. How are you?
Thank you, Ake. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very well. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, same here. Matthias, you're looking back at more than 15 years of an established design career across industrial and product design, and it actually took you from Germany to China and back again. You've been working for some household names in the industry, from Harman to Design It to Star and Frog. So Matthias, I'm wondering first off, what on earth took you into or brought you into design? Can you share a few insights about how this whole journey started for you?
Yeah, sure. So for me, design was something very mysterious when I was still at school. I always had a knack for, I think, drawing and sketching and art, but also quite fascinated by technology. And I'm rather old, so the late 90s, that's when I was in high school, there was the advent of the internet, right? So that was something that fascinated me. And you probably remember those old modems, right, with the quirky sounds. So after school, I thought, okay, what can I do, right, to leverage my passion? And I eventually applied for two studies, industrial design, and on the other hand, computer science, because I want to get into coding and web design. Eventually, I went for the creative studies, industrial design, but I didn't give up on the other passion and actually financed my studies more or less by working as a freelancer, doing a lot of web design projects, content management systems. So I knew a little bit of coding. I lost most of it by the time, but those were basically my two passions. And it's funny, right? Because at that time it couldn't have been further apart, but today it's very much converged when we look at product design, especially on the digital side. But yeah, that sort of brought me into design. And then during my studies, I focused more on technology products, so consumer electronics, but also futuristic concepts such as cargo drones, exoskeletons, and whatnot. So fun stuff. But what really was almost a pivotal moment for me during my studies when I went to the north of Sweden, to the Umeå Institute of Design, where I
Very well known.
Yeah, back then they were famous for their sketching class, but also for the Scandinavian design. And what's very inherent to Scandinavian design is the human factor. And so for me, that was an eye opener back then, because they already they taught human-centric design, or design thinking, call it whatever, right? But a process-oriented, almost scientific approach towards design, right? Starting with first of all, identifying a problem, and then coming up with an iterative process of finding the right solutions for a defined group of people. And for me, that's still how I look at design to this very day.
Right. You just started a new challenge, and that also has something to do with Nordic countries. So which organizations are you with now, and what will be your new role?
Yeah, I've just recently started a new challenge, I would call it. If there was just one constant in my professional life so far, then it was always about pioneering design teams or setting up studios. I've done it in-house, Harman, right, but also on the agency side. And now I'm joining Manyone, or I just recently joined Manyone. And it's an interesting hybrid of a design and a strategy firm. But it's not a waterfall process of doing the strategy work first and then doing the design afterward. But it's more an intertwined way of going about these two disciplines, and that's already very much reflected in the way the teams are assembled. And I think this is very needed these days because I guess you could probably tell too, right? The world spins faster and faster. And I think for many companies who want to stay relevant in this world, they need to really embrace change and deliver solutions that remain a value for people, right? And people in a wider sense, not just consumers or customers, but also their employees. And I think Manyone is in that spot. And very much looking forward to that new journey, which is about to start.
And you will be building another team for Manyone who actually came out of Design It, I guess, in Denmark a couple of years back. So I'm wondering, you mentioned team building a couple of times now. So what makes a good design team for you? If you can imagine your dream design team in Munich, in Manyone in 1 or 2 years, who would be on it?
Yeah, that's a big question, and it occupies my mind quite a bit these days. But I think there are a couple of hygiene factors, right? I mean, skills, right, and you need to be able to communicate and so on. But I think what's most important for me is that we build an environment of trust. Right? I've seen that many times that people really they really unfold, they get out of their comfort zone if they feel that they're in a trustworthy environment. And for me, that was always really, really important when I built teams. I wanted to build the environment for them to be creative, right? To think outside of the box, so they feel not just safe but also valued. And so that for me, that's also my how I see my role, right? When it comes to the respective people, what I experienced already in Umeo back then was it's really a great benefit if there is a very international crowd in a team, right? Because I mean, many times we work on global problems, right, or global solutions. So you need also a team which embodies that global mindset. And I think this is one important component. And then, of course, right, I mean, we need not only diversity in terms of the national setup, but also in terms of backgrounds, genders, and so on. So that's really, really important when it comes to assembling the right team. And I hope we find the people that that sort of meet that vision that I have for Manyone Munich.
Yeah, I wish you all the best for this, and if we can support we will do so. And anybody out there who's looking for a new design role in Munich, reach out to Matthias. I have a question actually following up on this because you worked as a designer. Your whole experience is working as a designer and being a designer, and now you are a design leader. You're building a design team. You're building trust and creating space for others to design. So I'm wondering on this development of yours, was there something or somebody that helped you transition into that role? If there is a point that you can pinpoint something like a transition or a moment, something that helped you elevate your knowledge from doing to leading.
Yeah, I think it was very early in my career when I started my first job at Design It. Back then, I joined the Munich team, which was 4 people strong, most of them expats from Denmark. And I think there is also a benefit if you join a small design team, right? Because you, as a junior designer or as an intern, you get quite a lot of responsibility, right? You get more exposure to various parts of how a studio is run, right? So from client meetings, maybe also looking off the shoulder when it comes to business development. So I had that exposure, and for me, that was a great boost almost for my career, right? Because even in a larger like in a larger agency, there are more levels, right? And all people need to stay busy. So as an intern, not always, right? I think I learned from experience. I'm always in all setups I had in my career. I wanted to have interns on the table, right, and speak up and contribute. But I think that is a fantastic opportunity if you start into your career, right, to get as much exposure to various parts of the operations, not just working on a project as a contributor, but also beyond.
Yes, definitely. I can fully follow you that being exposed to people who are actually also directly lead projects and being on a par with them on the same level is a wonderful experience. And no big organization can probably offer this, where you have to work through levels and seniorities. But Matthias, now that we have been talking about this a little bit beforehand, and you said something that struck me, where maybe some people would beg to differ, but you say you're convinced that design has arrived at, let's see, the C-level suit that designers are finally being recognized by design leaders. Um, so, and actually working with managers maybe on an eye level. So what makes you convinced about this? And can you explain us a little bit about this?
I think design and the design industry came a long way, right? When I think back in the early days of my professional life, usually we received an RFP or a briefing, and everything was detailed in terms of what what the client needed. So the so-called German Lastenheft, right? But when we have conversations with clients these days, right? It rather starts with a problem at best, or with we need to do something right in that area, right? Can you help us? And then we'd rather have a scoping conversation first, or a scoping workshop even, right, to determine what to go into the project and how we can best create an outcome that really helps them to stay ahead of the curve, right, or catch up. But so I think companies or agencies, right, like Frog or IDEO, I think they did a lot in terms of educating across industries what the benefits are of design thinking. Big buzzword, but I think that resonated a lot within organizations, all the way to the C-suite, right? And today, when it comes to leaders of companies, right, they're facing a whatever called the VUCA world. Or I'm not calling that; it's a term, right? It was coined like 20 years ago. But I like the that acronym, because it stands for four aspects, right? That I think are very prevalent in our world today, and it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? And when you think about these words, right, what they mean and what they entail is that change is very rapid, right? It's also quite unpredictable these days. And 2008, right, the world financial crisis, who predicted it? No one, right? COVID came all of a sudden, right? So we've seen these major crises, and at the same time, we as societies, but also as companies, need to be prepared for it somehow, right? So how we go about that? And then we also live in a very, very complex world, right? Like, there's no single solution. Every solution lives in an ecosystem of solutions, right? With all these API integrations, right? You basically have to have clarity, right, to connect the dots, right? And at the same time, also, the way we behave as people right now, societies, it's we change our habits. We're less constant, I think, right? So, and if you think about that and what design can do in order to counter all these risks or these factors, there is along the entire value chain that design can bring a rich toolbox, right? So design research, we can do North Star visions, future casting, right? All this helps leaders also to create a vision that they want to pursue, right? That gives orientation and also security guidance to organizations and to employees within these organizations. And I think this is that's also the reason why design is or design teams are working on eye levels, right? On in organizations.
Well, I mean, the notion of strategy and strategic design, foresight, etc., is everybody knows it's there. It's much harder to actually do it. So, and I'm wondering, do you have an example where you can a little bit take us on the road and through the story of a project where actually design had this kind of North Star role, giving finding a path through uncertainty, but also really pushing people towards believing into maybe a product vision or an idea and deciding to go for it, to invest resources for it. Is there something from your work that you can share?
Yeah, maybe think there's maybe one project that maybe that's a good fit because we also submitted it for the UX Design Award back then. A project for Zeiss. It's called Visu 360. It's basically a telemedicine platform that connects patients and eye doctors and retailers. And so it actually goes back to what I just said. It's a fairly complex environment, right? Because in the medical space, you don't only have to meet a lot of regulatory requirements, but there are also a lot of stakeholders, right, that you need to connect in order to provide a seamless experience for all users involved. And in order to get the buy-in, right, from the organization. Very initially, we actually had that scoping conversation, as I just mentioned, with a functional department, a product team who wanted to build something in that regard, right? And we helped them to define that vision, to reduce complexity for the sake of telling a story that clearly shows what are the benefits for the respective involved actors, like the patient, right, the retailer, the optometrist doctors, or the eye doctors, and in a short video, just 2 minutes length, we were able to tell that story, and also in a little bit of an emotional fashion, right? Because we connect much easier on the emotional layer as on just the rational number sheets, and I think that was that really helped, right? Because not only did we get the buy-in from the Zeiss management, but also we got partners on board, right? And the reader didn't do it all, right? They just contributed to the bigger narrative, right? But it certainly helped to get people on board, and then we were able to kick off that product development and design project and make that platform a reality. So that's that was I think a good experience in that regard. Right?
Was it a film about the platform, or was it rather a film about what the outcome could be of the product?
Exactly. So I think that I think we came up with a good framework for storytelling, which usually starts with, okay, who are the involved actors? What challenges are they facing today? And how could the future experience resolve their problems, right? And we show how the interaction between actors would go about, but then also show what what would be, not just what the product is, right? Eventually, well, it's a telemedicine platform, right? But what's the effect of that platform? So what is the outcome, in other words, right? So does it it helps patients, right? Because they have a less complex journey to actually purchasing classes. It helps doctors, right? Because they get their schedules filled, and they can actually work from their home office, which was a big benefit, especially when you think of the pandemic days. And retailers, right? They can generate more revenue, right? Because they can sell more classes on the spot, right? And then they don't lose the interested customers. So I think that's again something which I think helped eventually to make that story so powerful, right? Because it's not just about a beautiful platform in simple words, but it's actually about what the potential that platform can generate, right, for various involved stakeholders. So it's a win-win-win situation.
Yes, it's about the potential, and it's about a bit business outcome as well. So it makes the point also for management who have to decide about investment decisions. And it makes a point about the users on different levels. So I think that's a wonderful example of maybe how to advocate for design or how to sell design, which is a really tricky question, as well as, or also if you participate, for instance, in an award and you need to bring over or sell the point of your product in a short, concise way for people who are supposed to judge it and maybe have a limited amount of time looking for dozens and dozens of solutions. So I'm just wondering, I mean, looking back at your own point of view and your own experience, is there one thing, or is maybe several things that help you actually advocate for design decisions? Or what's your most important message that you want to bring over to a client, and maybe to whom?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, right? Because it's there's a lot talked about design and the value design can bring. There are there's an ever-growing amount of design conferences, which I really much enjoy, right? And there are a lot of great talks. But I think there's too much conversation happening within the design community, right? And I think designers can be more oriented towards other communities outside of the design bubble, right? To really bring across what the value of design could be, right? And like I said earlier, Frog and IDEO, they did a lot of education about design, but I think there is still the need for advocating more about the business value of design, in other words, right? Because eventually, I mean, it's great to have a powerful design system, right, and a functional prototype and all that, right? But for me, I think it's a conduit, right, to a bigger thing, and I think that bigger thing is many times quite in reach if the solution is good, right? So what I mean is, when we pitch a design, right, then it is also about KPIs on the other hand, right? So and those KPIs are very different depending on which area you're operating. So if you're in a product firm doing a SaaS software, right, it's about engagement, and you want to avoid churn, you want to get the conversation rate up, and so on. But if you do a project which is more oriented towards employee experience, right, then it's totally different, right? Then maybe a new enterprise tool that a team develops is more geared towards enhancing the employee experience and thus the employee satisfaction to make people feel more motivated as they go about their day-by-day job, right? Or if you do a project for a shop floor in a factory, right, this may enhance the safety of workers, right? And not just in Munich or in Germany or in Europe, but also when it comes to other places in this world. And so I think there's also a responsibility that designers do have, right, to think of the entire value chain, not just the next client or the direct client, but actually the suppliers as well, and the manufacturers and the people who work there, right? So I think this is something that we should also take into account when it comes to KPIs, right?
Yes, I'm glad you touched upon this point. This is something that we hear a lot in the juries, that it's about the famous word holistic view about a product, but it's really thinking about the context around a solution as well, not only about what happens before and after the core users are in touch, but what about other people that are involved and who may be touched upon by a situation, by a solution, or even our surroundings and nature as well. There is the famous notion of treating trees as users as well, because they are affected. So, but it's a little bit about the thinking beyond the Tellerrand, as we say in German, about the affected around the core work that you're doing. So, Matthias, you'll be joining the UX Design Awards jury very soon, and actually, most of the time when I look back at the jury sessions, our jury members spend time discussing the reasons of a solution. Why is it there? The why. Do people really need it? Does it make a difference? How relevant is it? So, and this is of course a very difficult notion, as you said. Like an application for a worker can be very relevant in that application area, and a tool for children, to be not only in education, but maybe getting through a road trip, with a car in a calm manner, can also be very relevant, just as well as a healthcare solution, obviously. So I'm wondering, in your opinion, I mean, like, to you, what makes a product relevant? Is that something that, I know it's a big question, but maybe you can. There is some key points and elements that are really close to your heart about this.
Yeah, I think it becomes harder and harder, right? Because there is just an abundance of products, of digital products, of physical products that surrounds us. If you look for any product on Amazon, you have the choice of 10 to 100. So the question for me is always, why do we need yet another product, right? What does it do differently than the ones that we already have, right? While I think it's in our nature, right, to be to be innovative. I think I really believe that people wanna design or develop something new, but not just for the sake of it, right? So I think we should be very careful with our resources, right, first of all, not just with physical resource, but also with immaterial resources, right? The energy, also the World Wide Web consumes. I don't have the numbers. I think as much as the worldwide airline traffic. So that's immense, right? So given all that, so it's a responsibility, right, to bring a product out on the market, and so clearly there needs to be a problem, right, that is solved by the product. That's my philosophy, right? Goes back to Imio. But how many people do we address with that solution for the problem, right? I think this is also an important point to consider. Is it? I mean, it's also fair to create a solution for a niche market, right? Especially people maybe who don't represent the majority in our society. They also deserve a solution that makes their life more colorful, richer. So I don't necessarily see that as a hard fact, but it's something to consider. And then also, what I think the one point that I just made, right, about the entire value chain, also downstream, is important to consider in the concept or in the product, right? So I think one good example that I have, I unfortunately didn't work on that product, is it's a bag brand. So they do sport bags, backpacks from the US. They're called Cotopaxi. I think why their products for me they really stand out is they're so first of all it's a carbon neutral company. So they also have a B Corp label, which it's an official label that categorize them as a sustainable company. But what they did is quite interesting when it comes to their bag design. They actually co-create with factory workers in the Philippines. So factory workers in the Philippines, they can actually choose different patches or different colors and sew it together to the bag. So every single bag is actually unique, right? And all the patches, all the pieces, they're actually leftovers, right? So they're left over from other apparel companies. So this is so smart, right? And I think this is one example where I think it's a lifestyle product, right? But on the other hand, it doesn't do any harm, and it actually involves in a creative way people down to the assembly line, right? So I think this is pretty cool. I'm not sure whether we can kind of convert that example into other industries easily, like the automotive industry or whatnot. But I think it's a good example.
I think it's definitely a great challenge if you set it out for you as a company and as a designer to really look around the needs and involve everybody throughout an entire value chain, and maybe people who weren't part of it yet. That would be even better, and create additional value for them. There's several projects of that kind that come to the mind readily. Just going back to the jury and your jury role, what are you looking forward, and what do you expect from participants?
Yeah, I'm very curious by nature, and I guess we're gonna see a lot of surprising new takes on product design, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to joining the conversations with other jury members, because I think it's when it comes to design awards, I've been following the UX Design Award for quite a long time, because I think it's a little bit different compared to other popular design awards, because the focus is really more on quality than quantity, and yeah, the justification is really the impact, the positive impact the solutions should have on planet, on people.
Well, I'm glad that you're saying this. This is actually what we strive for, what we aim for, and I'm very happy that you see it that way. Actually, because it's a part of our mission at International Design Center Berlin, that we actually strive towards promoting the value of good design. And actually, an award to us is just a vehicle to create a stage for people who do good work, show the good work, promote it, and focus also on a core thematic and a core field in design, and not go too broad into all fields. So really happy that you see it that way, and looking forward to have you on the jury. Last question before we get out. Is there anything you can share, you would like to share with our community, something that inspires you at the moment? Is there a film, a book, something that everybody working in design and interested in UX should read or see?
Well, I hardly get to read books these days, because my family, my kids keep me busy. But I during my vacation, I actually consumed. I always inhaled a book, which I find very inspirational and motivating. I mean, that goes back a little bit to what I said before about that VUCA world, and it may have sounded a bit too dystopian. But so there's a book by Rutger Bregman. It's a Dutch historian, called Humankind: A Hopeful History, and it's it challenges sort of that narrative that people are or humans are aggressive, right, or inherently selfish. Especially when when you watch the news every day, that's easily the narrative that you would have top of mind, right? But instead, the author says that it's actually more cooperation that's in our nature, and it's more kindness that's in our nature. And while there will always be good and bad in the world, right? But I think it's a very optimistic view on our future and on our human nature, and has not much to do with design at first. But when you think about it, there's a lot we can learn also as designers from the author's observations. So I recommend that one.
I love this. We'll put this into the show notes. I want to read it too. If it's about people, it's also about design, and ending up with a hopeful note is something really beautiful. So thank you for this, Matthias. And thank you so much for an insightful, short but insightful chat. And I'm looking forward to see you on the jury very soon.
Likewise. Thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Ake.
So that's it for this UX conversation. If you want to see more, just check out our website and YouTube channel so you see the documentation of all the talks we had until now. I hope that you enjoyed this talk and hope to see you very soon again.